Hello everyone, and a good day to all of you. Hope you're all doing well. I wanted to give a review today on the Modtac Suppressor Shield. I've had this for about a month, and overall, I quite like it. I will say that all the advertised features, if you've looked into this before, that Modtac says that this does, it absolutely does. It does them well, but it also has a few unintended kind of side effects regarding the mounting of other accessories that I did want to talk about and spend a little bit of time on, though I'm going to be reviewing everything regarding this Suppressor Shield's performance. So overall, starting with the benefits of this shield compared to just your conventional suppressor cover, this is something that Modtac themselves do advertise quite a bit as well, but the biggest advantage of this is just that it doesn't insulate heat into the suppressor itself compared to a regular fabric cover. Now how it does that, if you look, you actually have a standoff between the shield itself, which is this outer ring right here, and then of course the suppressor itself, just my Cat WB718 right there, you can see in the middle. So since it has that standoff, it has nice airflow, which actually, on a side note, this does somewhat marginally help to make the whole thing cool down just a bit quicker, I will say, because it has that added surface area, which is nice. Marginal ultimately, but still, point is, it doesn't insulate heat into the suppressor. Now for me, I just wanted some sort of suppressor cover just in general, because especially on this 10.3, with the suppressor being right here, I would, especially when this is slung, it would be very common where the suppressor would get a little close to my leg. I didn't want to get burnt. I've always been pretty mindful of it, and I haven't so far, but I was worried about that being the case, especially if I had to go completely hands-free and do something else when this is slung, and you know, if I couldn't reach it in time to prevent burning a hole in my pants and into my leg. So this does that. It does it very well, though I will say that although this will not get as hot as the suppressor itself, it will prevent you from getting an actual burn injury. This still gets pretty hot, especially under longer strings of fire. But even something as low as 30 rounds, if you do it in fairly rapid succession, I'm not even saying a mag dump, but just, you know, a reasonable fire rate, this will get hot enough to where it's uncomfortable to touch. Again, not so hot to where it'll cause an injury, but not the most pleasant either. So I'm going to show you some footage that I recorded out at the range. So I'm testing this suppressor shield and then just the bare Cat WB718 under it, just under thermal FLIR camera. And then I'm letting it sit for 5 minutes and just showing how the heat is radiated through. Thermal test, this is without the shield, just the Cat WB718. Here's how the rifle with the Cat WB718 looks after exactly 5 minutes of cooling. You can see the suppressor itself is still glowing quite a bit. Handguard, once that thermal there refreshes, handguard is pretty hot as well. That number you're seeing there is not calibrated, it's not accurate, but you can see just relative to just the ambient temperature here, this is quite a bit hotter. Switching now to the Modtac Suppressor Shield. Now here's the Modtac Suppressor Shield after 5 minutes of cooling. So you can see how the heat has radiated through the suppressor shield. Looks pretty bright there, now that the thermal has refreshed. Same thing here, you can see the barrel itself, of course, is heated up about the same, but yeah, do note that. I do want to talk about how this suppressor shield attaches, because this is a QD. A few interesting points on it. Something I actually noticed when I was recording that thermal footage is, well, I'll just show you and then I can explain as I go. So how this works, you saw just a quarter turn, very straightforward, just 90 degrees, and you just have the female coupler, as they call it, just this locking ring right here, which goes around your handguard, you can see. And I'm removing my suppressor so you can see this a little bit better. But you just pretty much have a little leaf spring here, and the male part, the shield itself, this just locks. You see you have an indexing arrow right there, which lines up 12 o'clock with the coupler. Now, you do have two different types of coupler on this. You have the U-RAC, as it's called, which is universal and just mounts to the 12 o'clock Picatinny, which is how I have it, since This is a 416 platform, and this is the only type of adapter you have for this. If you have very specific handguards, you can use their M-RAC, which is a side-mounted 3 and 9 o'clock M-lock. So that one seems quite nice if you have a compatible handguard, which I don't. That M-RAC will alleviate some of the attachment problems that I will be discussing later, but just focusing on this right now, just so you can see. So there's that again. So you would just take this indexing notch. You can see it just sits right there, and then you just turn it, and it just locks in. Now, one thing I noticed, like I said, when I was doing that thermal footage is if you get the slightest bit of grit into these, I wouldn't really call it threads. It's more of just two lugs if you look at the back of this and how it's set up. But something with how the leaf spring is in the female portion right here seems to be very sensitive to getting dust or carbon in it. I did find out that my upper right here doesn't have the most efficient gas system, so that it is kicking a little bit of carbon forward from the gas block right around here. And some of that, when I was shooting with just the suppressor, without the suppressor shield, kind of got into the, I think got into the spring and really made it difficult to reattach the shield itself for a while. I sprayed this out and it's good to go now, but yeah, just keep in mind it is kind of sensitive to that. They do ship this, or I should say at least when I got it, they ship this with a very generous amount of molybdenum anti-seize, like the Aeroshell 63, I think. Now, I really don't think it's necessary, honestly. It just gets everywhere. The reason I don't say it's really necessary is because this isn't really your traditional type of thread. It's just lugs. And actually, when I recorded that footage and when I ran into that issue the first time with it not wanting to go back in, it had a copious amount of that anti-seize on it still. But yeah, I wiped it off at this point, and a lot of it did burn off. If you want to use anti-seize, which again, I don't think is really necessary on this, but if you do, just use ceramic, should be your best bet. It has a higher temperature rating than the molybdenum type, and it doesn't interact badly with certain metals like the copper anti-seize would. I wanted to talk about the color, the overall appearance of this. You can see, if I back up and just kind of move this around in the light, you can see this has, it looks like in the visible spectrum, has somewhat of a bit of a maybe semi-gloss appearance to it. I will say though, I tested this, looked at it under NIR, and it's fine. Under NODs, this doesn't have any issues with remission whatsoever. The aluminum portion, as well as the shield here, is all good. The shield is made out of carbon fiber, so I wouldn't expect it to have any issues. Usually carbon fiber and polymers, that sort of thing, look perfectly fine under night vision. If you want to paint this, however, so first off, they do offer a Cerakoted version, at least right now. They're claiming it's a limited edition field drab on their website. So you can get it Cerakoted, you can get it Cerakoted after the fact, or apparently you can just spray paint it. I've personally been a bit leery about doing that myself. I was worried it might cook off potentially because, like I said, although this doesn't get as hot as a suppressor itself, it still gets pretty hot. So I'm not sure how durable that would be, especially being right there on a suppressor. But otherwise, if you just have the normal shield itself, it just has a multicam black-esque appearance. It ships in a multicam black bag, and yeah, it looks fine. I don't really have any complaints about it. It matches well with the rest of the rifle, so I'm just gonna leave it. Another advantage of this suppressor shield is that it redirects Mirage, and I will say I tested this on this rifle with just a magnifier, and it does an incredibly good job. I first started noticing Mirage when I was shooting just some precision with my MR762, and I wanted to put one of these suppressor shields on there, which, as a bit of a side note, will not work. So if you have your own MR762, MR308 or anything 417 pattern, you cannot get their 416 version like this and expect it to fit. This whole time I was assuming that the 417 rail height was the same as the 416, but it's actually just a couple millimeters different. So keep that in mind. Unfortunately, I was planning to pick up another of these for my MR762, and before I installed this on here, I did just do a dry fit, which if you see that footage right there. Now obviously that's the suppressor shield on there is way too short, but that wasn't really what I was testing, obviously, because it's made for this. There's a different handguard to muzzle length on that MR762, so of course it wouldn't fit that way, but just really look at the height difference between the top of the shield and the bottom. Of course, it's just totally colliding there. But going back to my original point regarding the Mirage, yeah, this does a great job of redirecting that. So it all just goes out these bottom ports right here, you can see, and the Mirage just goes around any smoke goes around your scope and you really can't see it. Haven't had any issue with that at all with all the shooting I've been doing on this. I will say though, speaking of smoke, do expect this the first time you take it out to smoke. It'll have a bit of a weird smell to it, presumably from whatever leftover adhesives or whatever else in the manufacturing process is left over when you get it. It will cook off the first time. And on the weight, I did weigh this whole thing, the female plus male adapter, before I installed it here, and it's really not bad whatsoever. I'll put up the exact weight that I got. Just keep in mind, depending on the exact length you get, it will be slightly different, though I don't think it'll be very much, since the bulk of the material here is just this carbon fiber tube for the shield itself, and carbon fiber is crazy light, so you're not going to be too far off. And I mean, for sure, it's some weight out there, but it's not bad at all. I don't feel any perceptible difference as far as handling this with it on or with it off. The process itself to install this, at least on paper, is pretty straightforward. So you just take the female coupler portion, which is this right here, just everything except for the suppressor shield itself, and you just drop this onto your rail, just line it up so it's flush with it. If you have a completely flat handguard, it is really easy. I actually found out that although this B&T handguard looks flat, it is ever so slightly imperfect and not totally flat, so I had to kind of hold this in place and push it a bit down as I was torquing this, and fairly straightforward, just had to do it a few times, so just keep that in mind. And I would definitely watch it while you are torquing it down, because what I noticed on mine was it was wanting to drift downwards as I was applying torque, so I really had to hold it particularly firm as I was getting it towards those last few inch-pounds. Talking now about some of those aforementioned disadvantages, and there's things to keep in mind with this suppressor shield and how it interacts with other accessories. So once you have it installed, in particular with the U-RAC, keep in mind that this is occupying quite a few. It may not look like much, but you know, especially on a 10.3, every little bit of rail space is pretty valuable. And this takes up this whole portion here. So I used to have a iron sight on here, just a folding PRI sight, which I liked quite a bit. I did end up taking it off, and I haven't replaced it yet. One nice thing, if you want to run just a backup iron sight, is that very faint, if it'll focus there, American flag plate right there. You can actually take this plate off and you can instead install one of the Unity Tactical folding sights, and then you would just install that folding sight the same way you would with any other of their Fusion hub accessories. I didn't go that route because I'm thinking of changing a lot of things with how I have this set up, and that is a pretty good segue into those disadvantages. So in particular, if you have stuff that you want to mount on your 12 o'clock rail, especially on something like this, like for instance a laser aiming module, that is particularly difficult with this. So it's been something I've been thinking about a lot, because I've been wanting to get one of the Modtac suppressor shields on here. In this case, because it's a longer rifle, it would be more so for the Mirage benefits, but you know, just in case it happens to brush up against my leg or something else so it doesn't burn it. But running into difficulty because of the Raid XE, although yeah, I have room on this handguard to move it back, it's not the most comfortable if I were to do that, because I would prefer to have my grip right about here, actually slightly forward where the Raid XE is currently occupying. Already a little bit of a compromise, so I don't want to move this even further back to accommodate the suppressor shield. Now, one workaround to this is you could move your laser aiming module to a diving board or a center mounted type of setup. So that would be a way around it without crowding everything, because you know, you've already got the end of the rail taken up and the center of your rail taken up by the laser aiming module. Wouldn't be very optimal, at least not with a box-shaped laser. This doesn't just run into issues with laser aiming modules. One issue I found was with my light. So I was using a Rain 2.0, which would have barely had clearance had I removed the Unity, or not the Unity, but the 100 Concepts light cap, you know, this right here, and the light shot collar and all that. It would have barely fit, but it would have been a very close fit, at least with the mount I tried and all the other mounts I have on hand. I didn't really like that though, so I just opted to remove it, because had I wanted to use my light, keep in mind also, I was using a full-sized Rain 2.0, so on this short handguard, it would have made pretty much this entire right portion of the rail unusable for, you know, anything. If I ever wanted to switch hands or anything, it would be fully taken up by that flashlight. So it would have been right about back here, or maybe slightly back here if I'm remembering correctly. In other words, if you have a light with a larger light head, you're going to have to mount it flush with the handguard itself. It's not going to be able to overhang onto where the suppressor would normally be. Now, if you either have a larger light head with a pretty, far out there mount, or if you just have a more compact light head in general, just something like that, it'll work. And the Rain 2.0 I had, if I didn't have the light cap, it would fit too. But I'm not really willing to forego the light cap. It is such an advantage to not have that reflector just exposed. Other people could see it if they're flashing a light back at me for remission, all that, visual signature, reduction. So I took it off for the time being, and I'm thinking of how I want to approach putting it back on here. Currently, I'm just thinking of getting a much more compact, just a micro light body that can just sit. That way it's not taking up the whole of this side of the rifle, even though it will still be probably flush with the handguard itself, which isn't going to be ideal. You'll get a little bit of splash probably off of the suppressor shield, but it'll be something I can live with, I think. It's not something I've tested yet, but we'll see on that. And a lot of those issues are just due to the previous advantage that this does have an air gap between the suppressor itself, right? It has to be a bit larger diameter, so you can see if you look from this angle just how much it does stick out the side of the handguard. And actually another potential place where you may not run into this issue, not just with, if you have a micro light or that sort of thing. If you just have a larger handguard, it might work fine for you too. But at least with this B&T handguard, which is much, much more on the slimmer side, yeah, you'll run into that there. Give just a few more closing thoughts. I did want to touch on the price of the suppressor shield. It is a little bit more on the expensive side compared to a lot of the other ones out there that you see that are just the conventional suppressor covers. But comparing it to one of the nicer ones, for instance, the Liberty Defense straight jacket. So that one will start at $322 for a less than 7-inch version. So for example, if I were to do it because I just have the 5.5-inch suppressor shield, I would have saved money because the suppressor shield here, this cost me $409 with shipping and tax and all that, of course. But yeah, if you go to the longer Liberty Defense straight jackets, those pretty kind of skyrocket in price, really, to quite a bit more than this. So this, when you get to the longer versions, it will go up a little bit in price. I think the highest I saw was $429, at least as of recording this, compared to the Liberty Defense, which when you get longer, gets a lot more expensive than this suppressor shield would be. No chance of this melting onto the suppressor either, which is always really good. Only thing I would say to keep in mind, which was a little bit of a complaint when I ordered this, was just that they took a pretty long time to get this to me. Their website currently, they estimate a 2-week lead time on in-stock orders, which this was allegedly when I ordered it, and an 8-week lead time on back-ordered products. I ended up waiting 4.5 weeks from when I bought this to when I actually received it. Despite it saying in stock on the website, it was in fact not in stock. I found out, was able to get into contact with their customer service after I think about 4-ish, maybe 3.5 weeks of waiting before I finally did ask them about it. And it was a little bit hard to contact them, I will say that. They're a little bit slower, but yeah, they do seem good for it. Just keep in mind if you do need to contact them. I think I got a response in 2 or 3 days via email. That was also after I had called them by phone, which just went straight to voicemail. But overall, the suppressor shield itself, I would say, as far as the item itself goes, is really, really good. I would just say to keep in mind those potential issues that you might run into depending on what type of light you're running, if you're running a laser aiming module at all, and if so, what type as well. That might run into issues, it might not. Just something to keep in mind there, just regarding your setup with other accessories. But beyond that, yeah, it is pretty good. If you have any other questions on this, or if you want to add your own experiences, I would love to see those in the comments below. Always do read them, always appreciate seeing them. And otherwise, if nothing else, I hope that you enjoyed this video and found it informative, or at least interesting to learn about this Modtac suppressor shield, which is a pretty cool item. Otherwise, if nothing else, hope to see you all in the next one. Take care, and see you all then.